Hello, everybody. Alejandro here from Giro Labs. I'm pretty excited today to be chatting with you guys here and hosting Max Kaplan from SOL Strategies to hear on a few relevant topics about Solana network. So we're going to be chatting a little bit about institutional adoption, the state of MEV, the state of application control execution, and a few other exciting topics. So Max, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
It would be great, I think, if you could give like a quick introduction about yourself and then talk a little bit about Soul Strategies and what you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. So brief intro on me. So I really got into the crypto ecosystem in 2017, and I joined a really small company at the time called Kraken. We were 100 people, and we had 10 engineers, and we were just trying to figure out if this whole crypto thing was going to take off. And back then it was really only Bitcoin and Ethereum that had really any volume, right? So we were really small, and just like pushing ahead, trying to for crypto to take off. And then, all of a sudden, I wake up one day and, we're 3,000 people, team of 800 engineers, so I was senior director managing DevOps and data engineering at Kraken. And, we grew exponentially, right? So I spent 6 years at Kraken, and a lot of things changed. And I really got when I joined Kraken, I was really interested in crypto, but I actually found myself getting like really interested in trading. And really what happened was when Solana started coming out, I really made my first trade on Jupiter. And I was like, wow, this thing is like really interesting, and I think this is the future. So I ended up leaving Kraken. Long story short, I started my own company called Orange Ventures, which was a Solana validator. It got acquired by SOL Strategies, where now I'm the CTO. And really briefly about SOL Strategies, we are a public company that really does two things. Number one, we own a treasury. So we put our treasury into SOL, but we're not really one of those like full focused treasury companies where we're just trying to play the NAV play or the MNAV play, whatever. That brings us to our second side of the business, which is really tech and really what we're doing primarily right now, which is staking. So we have 3.8 million SOL delegated across 4 validators, including one white label validator we're running. And that's a good enough intro for right now.
Cool. Appreciate it, Max. Thanks for the context. So I'm going to start a little bit on the institutional side, right? So everybody's talking about institutions coming, that they're already here. And Solana is, trying to place itself as one of the avenues for institutional adoption within the crypto space. So what do you think is potentially holding back traditional financial institutions from building or participating on Solana at scale?
Yeah, really, if we're going to take a technical angle here, just like, based upon the audience here, what really it comes down to is users getting the best price, and also just like extractive, meme coin, like, extractive MEV. I don't know why I said meme coin there, but extractive MEV, right? And, like, listen, so I spent, many years talking to some of the biggest HFTs in my role of DevOps at Kraken. And, like really, these guys are super cutthroat, right? Like what really matters to them is latency and jitter. Okay. And, just like 20 milliseconds of jitter, even like a couple microseconds, right? That's the difference between them thinking they're going to make money, but actually losing money. Right. And, I remember one of the quotes one of them told me, I'll never forget it. Some of these people are just super cutthroat. They said, listen, we trade on 48 different exchanges. You guys are nothing special. And, that is like, I think that's like very relevant to Solana, right? In the sense that, like institutions, high frequency traders, things like that, they're going to go where they can get the best prices and make the most money. And, we like Solana itself has to be able to do that. And I think we're making tremendous progress on that. So just like for context as well, when I started at Kraken, our ad order latency was around like 1 to 200 milliseconds, right? Which is pretty bad. Now it's at like 3 milliseconds, with the great work that they've done past me. But Solana with 400 millisecond block times, pretty close. And once you start getting to like a range and like, 10, 20 around there, like in my experience, what really matters more about like jitter really matters more than latency once you start getting into those ranges. And I think that, like we have to really prioritize building the best possible trading experience, which is, like canceling orders on Solana can be a little difficult and not the best experience for market makers, but those are the things that I would say high level or medium level.
Got it. So, okay, so improving latency, improving jitter, and also to talk about improving transaction execution capabilities and
Yep.
enabling kind of like more customizable ways of executing orders and being able to place more custom types of like transactions, right? So I want
Yep.
to dive a little bit into the last part here.
Yeah.
How do you think Solana can enable these type of transactions on the chain?
Absolutely. So, I also ran, like one of the things is this, like, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but on a centralized exchange, 95, at least when I was there, 95% of orders are canceled. Okay. And that's because of the very fact that it's mostly just market makers, just like placing an order and then canceling it right away as soon as it's not profitable anymore. And, cancels really have to be treated specially, right? Like, because if a market maker can't place a cancel, like that, that's bad for them because then they might be they might be that order might be executed when the market maker didn't want it to be, and it's really bad for them, right? So in terms of like, so Solana is this really awesome general purpose blockchain, and there's so many awesome things on Solana, right? We got trading, which we talking about. We also have DPIN. We also have things like OR, things like that, right? But trading is like a special beast. And to answer your question, I think which I think was like what can we enable to build a better trading experience? Correct me there if I'm wrong, but it's really that I think we really have to do things such as prioritize cancels and also bring like the P99 latency, P95, P99, like let's just keep going with the nines. Bring those down, because if we can do that, bring latency down with things like Alpenglow, which is already in progress, I think we can build a really awesome trading experience that could actually be, that I think will be better than centralized exchanges, especially considering some of the fantastic advantages that DEXs have on retail over sexes. So I think there's really good benefits we can get. But to answer your question succinctly, prioritize cancels and improve on jitter.
Fantastic. Yeah. So that's one of the main things that we are addressing, right, actively with
Yep.
BAM through the plugin architecture, right? So the
Yep.
idea here is that, sophisticated market makers, independent developers, or existing big applications are able to come in, customize the way that their transactions are scheduled, and then enable application specific sequencing and other types of like custom trading strategies, right? But so that's on the side of customizability, right? Opening the door to that so that you have the flexibility in order to participate efficiently on the markets. But there's also the other side of like privacy and
Yeah.
execution guarantees, right? That are also very important for institutions. So can you talk maybe like a little bit about that and maybe what's lacking today in terms of privacy? And let's say determinism in transaction execution that
Yeah.
could potentially be solved on Solana.
Yeah, I mean, great points, right? But in the high frequency trading world, right? Like everyone is competing against everyone. It is like a very, very cutthroat business, and like if there was market maker A figured out what market maker B's addresses are and things like that, they could figure out like these are very sophisticated entities, right? And if they have their wallets and they could see like every little detail of it, for a fact that there's going to be a whole team of people working on reverse engineering what their strategies are. And it sucks for both of them. Okay. Because number one, like, let's just say market maker B has a strategy, market maker A, now reverse engineers it and then figures out another advantage in terms of, doing that faster. Okay. Market maker A now has an advantage. Market maker B lost it. Market maker B has to go back to the drawing board, figure out a new strategy. They do the same thing. And then it's just constant, just battling and battling and battling. Like on Solana, like really privacy is going to be really critical. for things like this, and also things outside of it, even just like really basic things like e-commerce, right? Like no one wants an e-commerce store, their competitor, to be able to sum up the revenue that like they're doing, you know? So privacy, I think, is going to be really important. It's like a relatively first class citizen with things like token extensions and things like that. But I know it's a little bit outside of Jito, but I think it's coming. Maybe that's a good topic. But yeah. So that's really important. Sorry, what was the second part of your question there?
Yeah, no. So it was around how do you think privacy and guaranteed transaction or
Correct.
higher transaction execution guarantees
Yeah.
also fit in beyond just like the performance side of the
Yeah. Absolutely. Like that's another really critical one too, where like I heard for like firsthand about from market makers where they were actually somewhat annoyed with some centralized exchanges where what they said about certain trading engines of certain other centralized exchanges, where they said that their trading engine was actually felt more like a VM, where like these market makers also figure out like how certain like transactions execute. But like for retail, some of these other things, like they'll implement like all these like advanced order types, which are like great for retail, like things like, I don't know, like trailing stops, but like all these other different ones. But the market makers don't really, like when these things change and they're not consistent, that destroys their strategy. And when that happens, it's a very bad thing, because if they can't like figure out some way that they're going to make money, like if they can't like have some guarantee in terms of like how their trades are going to be executed, they are not going to want to trade on these exchanges, right? So in terms of like execution guarantees, it's extremely critical, because institutions like this, like they are only trading because they want to make money, right? And, like I think that's obvious. And they, in order for them to trade, they have to have some sort of guarantees to be able to do that. And having guarantees of execution, things like bundles and things like that, very, very critical for these entities. And also too, which is like what I'm really excited about, like with BAM, is really like, placing just like doing things like placing cancels at the top of the block and things like that. If you look around at Hyperliquid, I think that was one of like the really good things that they did. And I probably like one of the most exciting thing, like, probably one of the things I am the most excited about on Solana overall is the fact that BAM is going to be able to do this. I'm very excited about that.
So you also mentioned, Max, the retail investors and traders, right? So
Yeah.
we talked a little bit about the institutions and how they need these, better execution guarantees, privacy, and also customizability. But
Yeah.
how do you think this reimagined approach to block building benefits retail users and traders?
Yeah, well, I might take a different angle here. Is that um like let me just start high level. I might start like if something like a little bit that doesn't have to do with Jito, just but I will circle back. Um one of the advantages I think DEXs have over centralized exchanges is the how fast a new token gets listed, which is really instant. And if you look at things like when the Trump meme coin launched in January, that like Solana DEXs did double the volume of both Kraken and Coinbase combined, which is ridiculous. That's insane. So that is really awesome. And a SEX just cannot compete on token listings. And that's really important too to talk about why. It's because most of that volume was like in the early few minutes and hours of when that token got listed. Most of these centralized exchanges, the fastest one listed it 7 hours after it got launched, and it was far too late. Okay. So that's where I think those things benefit retail. But how something like this could benefit retail is that if traders can get, and what Jito is going to bring, like retail also, there are like sophisticated retail, right? Like there's like, it's not just like retail and like they're dumb, right? Like it's a spectrum, right? Like there's retail who's just like just placing an order for the first time. And then there is retail who is just like, okay, listen, like I'm going to place like a couple orders a month, but I want the best prices. If we get institutions on chain, like actually doing sophisticated market making, those retail users are going to get better prices, right? Because in the traditional trading world, it's very rare one retail user trades against another. What is usually the case is that a retail user is trading against some high frequency trader, some market maker, right? And the more we can get those users on chain, like the institutional, the better the prices retail is going to get. And with something like BAM, I think that's really going to enable more institutional volume, more market makers to come on chain, which is going to benefit everyone.
Now, on the developer side, right? What do you think that allowing developers to build closer to block space and have access to uh, the customizability, right? That the scheduler within BAM allows
Yeah.
will enable for the entire ecosystem and the developer and application ecosystem on Solana.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And, I want to preface it by saying that, it's so new and I probably have like, so, I'll probably be wrong. Right. But, let's just make some predictions here. Like one of them we talked about is trading, and that's probably the one that's the most exciting to me. But, I might throw in some hot takes here. But, like that's there. Right. But in some like interesting world, you could almost turn these into like network extensions if you tilt your head a little bit, right? And like there's a lot of like there's like other applications, like there's applications on the other end of the spectrum, right? So like a really interesting one is like OR, right? Like proof of work type stuff, and I'm really interested to see like how these trade like these BAM type schedulers like supplement or conflict with like something like OR, where like an application like OR really wants like all those like things built into it, right? But also like I think that is like going to be an obvious one is like there's going to be like selfish validators, and I think that's fine, right? Like there's going to be like like block space, I always forget the acronym, sorry, but schedulers that are built to just be like, hey, let's just prioritize revenue, right? And I think that's fine. I think you're going to be able to like if an application can really get a sufficient amount of stake on one of these things, you can almost tilt your head a little bit and look at it like a network extension, right? I think it's to be, I think it's to be determined in terms of how well we see things like that. And, like I obviously don't have my head fully wrapped around the system, but conceptually, that's the way I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, the idea is that BAM becomes this programmable, right, platform that developers can access, and they get all the network effects from the stake that's already participating in the system, right? So that would allow them to just come in, jump in, and build, right, without having to figure out all the BD part of like onboarding the necessary amount of stake, so that whatever custom scheduling they're trying to implement actually has enough stake to execute the transactions, right?
Yep.
So we've touched upon institutions, retail users, application developers, but I'm definitely interested in listening to what you think this could mean at the validator level, right? So if BAM opens up all of these possibilities for all these market participants, how will that reflect in the validator ecosystem? What will be the benefits? What do you see for the validators on Solana, and what's the future for Solana validators with this new paradigm?
Yeah, I think it's just the main thing is greater flexibility, right? And like there's things that we like validators can pick and choose, like really how they want to pack blocks, and I think there's going to be like many different strategies, right? Like I think it's inevitable that there is going to be some validators where they just want to like just make the most amount of money. And I think that's fair. And I think we've seen that in the Ethereum landscape for quite some time with PBS. And, I think it's like very extractive, right? But I think that like, that's inevitable there, but like for us at SOL Strategies, like, like we're kind of like, we walk this line with like, we talk with like a lot of like really like tradfi type investors where like one of the pitches we do, like one of my favorite things to show them is like volume, right? Like the volume on dexes, right? And like that really gets through to them. And like I really would like to prioritize just like building the best possible trading experience that there is, because I think Solana, like the decentralized NASDAQ thing, like that's what brought me into Solana and what motivates me today. And like I would love to see us, like to be determined, but like, like for me personally, I would like to run something that, is going to make the trading experience better, which is like some of the things we talked about, placing cancels at the top of the block, things like that. I think there's going to be other applications though, like, like an OR or something like that. I'm not trying to like, like whatever, but like, there's going to be like these like many unique use cases where, developers can tap into stake and, get their applications to function in a way where they want it to, so long as they can get a sufficient amount of stake. And it really, in general, I think to summarize, is just greater flexibility, right? And better guarantees around like how your applications are going to function. That is like that I think is going to be really interesting.
Got it. So I also want to go back a little bit into value extraction and MEV, right?
Mhm.
You alluded to that in the beginning. How big of a challenge do you think that is for Solana today? And how much do you think it's actually not only impacting adoption but impacting existing users? And how important is it to do something about it?
Yeah, like I think that can sometimes be the missing the forest for the trees. Like it is a problem, and I want to say it, but like really in general, like what matters the most is, are users getting good prices, right? And like that is like the problem we need to solve, right? And if users like if a user is getting a good price, and like I'm not saying this is like a great thing, but just hypothetically, if the user is getting a good price, but there's like super extractive like things going on in the background where you're getting front run, back ran, like whatever, like the user trading isn't, like doesn't like isn't like probably won't even notice. Okay. Now like these types of things affect the prices, right? So I'm not trying to just like, ignore that fact, but like I think it, like we have to stop it, and like we have to do things to make sure that users are getting the good prices. This type of front running, back running, really sandwiching does affect prices. I think there's other things around it as well, just like, such as just like AMMs versus claws versus like, this whole debate that's really been, talked about for like a very long time. But like I don't necessarily like want to look like, I think just like the extraction piece, that's one angle of it. And like I think we have some solutions there. Like Cheeto's doing a lot. Like sorry, multiple concurrent leaders, things like that are all gonna like just make this really more competitive. So we do have to worry about it. We do want to stop it, but the North Star goal should be making sure that users are getting the best prices. And if we do that, and they continue to get consistent latency, consistent guarantees around how they're trading, we're going to have a good world, in my opinion.
Now, how would you balance the need for all the performance improvements that you're mentioning with maintaining Solana's decentralization, right? What's the right balance that we have to strive for, and what is the ultimate goal here?
Great question. This is a tough one, but in my opinion, this is a controversial one, but in my opinion, like listen, like I don't think there's an investor out there in the world that is looking at like network A has 1,000 validators and network B has 5,000 validators. So let's value network B greater than network A. Like I think once you get above a certain number of validators, like I don't know what N is there, but like if you have like couple hundred unique entities really running something, I think that is likely sufficient. I don't think we need to get like, I think once you get like especially above like 1,000, 2,000, like I don't think there's like that much of a difference. If you get to 10,000, right? I think there's just more of like a nice to have, and I don't think many people care about that. But I think what really does matter is like things like geographic decentralization. But what I mean about that really is like, like can, if some news event happens, in like Japan or wherever, right? Can users there get like can users still get like can they place orders quickly enough, right? Which is a big problem on centralized exchanges today, where like it's very tough because you might have central sex A, sex in the west coast of the U.S., sex B in East Coast, sex C in Europe, things like that. Like that is a strength that I think a Solana can have if we have all these different validators all over the network. I personally don't view like the number of validators going up as like a good like that like something I'm like super happy about. It's nice to see, but like I think we just got to stop and figure out like what we're trying to solve for. And in my opinion, like what is going to really grow Solana, the network, make Sol, the asset, go up is activity. And like the number one activity that like is going to do that, in my opinion, is trading. So we got to continue to just build the best possible experience there, which I don't think is going to be like the highest number of validators, but I would like to see it sufficiently geographically decentralized.
Got it. So another question that I had for you was: do you have any thoughts on Ethereum's proposer builder separation and how it has evolved? You think there are any lessons for Solana there?
Yeah. So like, listen, I want to preface it by saying I'm not like the biggest Ethereum expert, but I have ran Ethereum validators, right? And you know, it got quite extractive with that. Like there's many things, right? Like number one, you had all these like some of the builders, like they would sanction OFAC, like white like OFAC blacklisted addresses, and others didn't. And then validators, some of them would go with like the builders that were sanctioned, like basically blocking the transactions from these OFAC sanctioned wallets. Some of them didn't, and that was like a huge issue there. But like, secondly, like I think the thing that was probably like the scariest there was just that like the blocks that these that these builders were building were just like the most extractive thing possible. Like just like whoever could extract the most money, it was like encouraged, right? And not only that, but you also had all these timing games going on Ethereum as well, where like you would have like the longer you wait to build a block on Ethereum, it's 12 seconds. The longer you wait, the more transactions you have. So like you get to pick from more, and then you really want to wait until like the last possible millisecond to go and put your block out. Otherwise, you could be missing transactions that are profitable. And what happens with that, to talk about like the negative stuff, just like tying everything together. Number one, users are getting really bad prices. Number two, the entire network slows down because of the fact that these validators are just waiting until like the last possible millisecond to extract every penny off of the users who are trading on chain. And that was like very bad. And I think that's why, if you just look at data, like one of the reasons why Solana dexes are just crushing Ethereum dexes, right? A lot of that stuff has gone away on L2s, like not because they did some crazy like thing to solve it. It's just because they're centralized, and there's like no real MEV to extract. I get like the sequencer can do it, but it's weird, right? It's just like a different world because it's just centralized. So yeah, like Ethereum, very extractive, and I don't love it.
And how do you think we can improve on that, or how do you think that BAM improves on that on Solana?
Yeah. So I don't have all the details yet in terms of how BAM can fully solve it, but I think I could just talk about what I would like to see. It's that like I would like one of the things that's special I think about Solana is the fact that like they try, like everyone pushes so hard against sandwiching, like the social layer really pushes hard against it, and I hope we can continue to do that. Being fully honest, I haven't looked so much into the BAM spec though that like I have a good answer on that.
Right. So I can jump in here a little bit and provide some context, because
Yeah,
that also leads into another question I wanted to ask.
yeah.
Um, Within the BAM network, right, you have the BAM nodes that they receive the transactions from the users, and they have a specialized scheduler that orders the transactions and keeps them private until execution, right? So the transactions are ordered, and then they're sent over to the
Mm,
BAM validators that connect to the BAM nodes for execution, right? And the interesting thing here is that privacy happens due to the TE infrastructure,
right.
but also the BAM nodes provide these attestations that transactions were ordered correctly and in the pre-specified order, right? So that if a validator deviates from that and includes a malicious transaction or sandwiches a user, the system will be able to recognize that and make it transparent to the rest of the network, right? So with that context, how do you feel about this idea that with the BAM network you have, again, this network of specialized nodes that act as schedulers, right, that provide this privacy and verifiability guarantees, and that then they connect to the validators for transaction execution?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be great, and I think that's going to solve like a lot of issues there. I mean, the fact you can plug in TEs, the fact that or things remain private. So like, like on Ethereum, like you have this mempool. I think you really nailed it there. Like you have this mempool where like all these like you can see all the pending transactions, but if all these things remain private, which is like really what I think that like this data should be considered private because these are pending transactions. Like that's going to really help, and I think that's going to solve a lot of really good things, which I'm excited about.
Cool. So, Max, thank you so much for your time and all the insights. This has been amazing, and really appreciate you being here with us. So, thanks everybody for tuning in. We were here with Max Kaplan from SOL Strategies, and we'll be seeing you around, Max.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. Been a big fan of Jito for a long time. Flip the hat around. Yeah, really excited to be a part of things, and we're looking forward to being a BAM validator. So thank you.
Thank you, Max.